To Kentucky, I was very interested in continuing that kind of work, but I found there was no nuclear freeze campaign here. And as far as general peace and social justice activities, there were a number of small groups working independently of each other. And so I began talking to people. Donna's dad, Will Hayes, was one of the people that I met very early on when I moved to Kentucky. And he was very interested in peace and social justice issues, and very interested in helping me meet people who were working in those areas and meet organizations that existed here. And so he gave me names and contact information and helped me get oriented and meet those people. And as I did and began to talk to people, the idea emerged of creating an umbrella organization that would draw them all together and strengthen the work that they did, make each group more aware of each other, give a larger pool of people maybe to pursue some activities and things. And so in the fall of 1983, I think it was October or November, we actually called together people for a meeting at which the decision was made to form the Central Kentucky Council for Peace and Justice. So that's the founding moment for this organization. And one thing I think that was helpful, even though it could be difficult at times, was the decision we made that the council's decision-making process would be a consensus process, that rather than a voting process where you might have a minority who lost a vote and then were unhappy about having lost, we would seek for unanimity before we would make a decision. And that meant that the decisions we made were very strong because we were united behind them. What it also meant, though, was when we failed to have that kind of unity, it could be frustrating to not be able to go forward with a particular decision because we weren't all unified. But I think most of us understood that because what the organization was a coalition, that the best way to hold it together was to try to have that kind of unity. We had some founding principles. One was that we believed in nonviolent solutions to conflict. So the organizations needed to see that as an important principle. Equitable distribution of the world's resources, acceptance of diversity in people, political systems, and beliefs, and respect for the dignity of every individual. So those were broad social justice principles that we adopted as an organization. And if an organization felt those were important principles to uphold, then they would decide themselves whether this was a good fit for them. Very early on, one friend of the council made a very large banner. I think it's something like 10 feet long by 4 feet deep or something, and it simply says Central Kentucky Council for Peace and Justice on it. It is so large that it's held up on poles, 5 different poles. And we've used it when we march in the 4th of July parade, when we march in the Martin Luther King parade, and it's been taken to peace marches in Washington several times. And one year, I don't remember exactly when it was, but there was a crowd shot of the March on Washington on the front of USA Today, and there was the Central Kentucky Council for Peace and Justice banner.
Moment in the sun.
And I was just so proud of that. I think it also was on their website, so that if you linked onto the website, it was there. So
it took 4 or 5 very strong persons, if there was any breeze at all, just to keep it up.
Right. And then when we got this office space at Central Christian Church, it was a fairly small space, but there was plenty of room for me to work. And this was back in the 1980s, before computers and some of the technologies we have today. So one of my most prized possessions was a Rolodex.
Explain what that is.
Which is one of those rotating things with individual cards that you keep people's phone numbers on, and you can flip through it. And I just thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And I had names and phone numbers and addresses of people from these organizations and other people who were sympathetic to these causes and so on my Rolodex. And one day I came into my office and the Rolodex was gone. The door had been locked. And as far as I can remember, it was locked when I went to enter the office. I wasn't thinking anything was awry, so I wasn't noticing, but I believe I didn't notice that it wasn't locked or anything. And so I asked her, and then I began to ask people on the council if they'd borrowed the Rolodex. Did they know what had happened? Nobody knew what had happened to it. And the only conclusion I could come to was that some agents of our government were worried about what we might be doing and wanted to know. And we all chuckled at the idea that perhaps they had gotten the names of some of our pacifist friends and people that were pretty harmless. But that has always remained a mystery. I have no idea what actually happened to it. Right.
That thought that that's what happened has become less and less ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely.
The longer time has gone on.
Absolutely.
I remember that demonstration at Larry Hopkins' office because I was foolish enough, as were others. It was around the clock, 24 hours. And I made the decision to take the 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock shift. And didn't know at the time I took that it was going to be like 10 below 0 with about a 20-mile-an-hour wind. I've never been so cold in my life. And when there were more than me there, but when the next crew came on, I think it might have been Betsy or someone else and asked where Betsy was. They couldn't find her. And I said, you might check that pile of blankets over there. That's where Betsy may be. And we always wondered which organization in the 4th of July parade was going to get booed the most. We kind of kept a tally on that. And when we all unfurled our banners, some of them were not the most popular in the world. So there was some...
Are you talking about me?
I am, Ernie, but I was going to let you tell that story. Okay, 25 years. What did we accomplish, really? And I thought about it when you brought up they're still talking about the same topics. Mm-hmm. So what have we accomplished, I think, is something we might want to think aloud about.
Well, I think we've raised the sensitivity of all these issues before the local communities, and I think that's the greatest. In a coordinated way, we're much more effective than individual ways. There's no question about that. All these 25 or 50 groups that are part of it, they all have their own agendas with their own organizations, but I think collectively, their force and impact is much greater. That's what I look at. And if Central Kentucky Council Peace and Justice did not exist, it would exist. It would be a reason for it to come into fruition now or some other time soon.
Two projects of the council we haven't mentioned yet. One is the newsletter, which started a few years after the council